So what happened at the Commons Ethics Committee? The Liberals apparently tried to redirect on the Jody Wilson-Raybould case. To talk more about it is Brian Lilley, one of our regular contributors. Brian, was there a little bit of smearing going on, perhaps?
Hal, there was more than smearing going on. There was an attempt to say that there's nothing more to see here. Don't worry about it. Let us move on. It's kind of like what we saw at the Justice Committee. Now, what's bizarre is that the Ethics Committee is one of the few Commons committees. There's only a few that are chaired by the opposition. And so this one is chaired by Conservative MP Bob Zimmer. Now, Bob Zimmer had said, okay, you want to bring this investigation forward? We'll listen to you. And I sat there listening on Tuesday afternoon for more than an hour as Conservative MP after NDP MP, Conservative MP, NDP MP. They went back and forth, all talking about why they needed to investigate this thing. And then the Liberals took over. And the Liberal who was doing most of the talking for the party is the vice chair of the committee. He's a guy named Nathaniel Erskine Smith, Toronto area MP. He's known for being a bit of a maverick. And the very morning of the committee meeting, he penned an op-ed in a Toronto newspaper saying, you know what, outside of confidence motions, outside of certain things, Liberal MPs should be able to do what they want. They should be free. They should be independent. And then he did exactly what the Prime Minister's office wanted. He ended up helping to shut down the Ethics Committee, saying, well, Justice is still looking into this. Now, the Justice Committee has said, we don't need to hear any more witnesses. Sure, Jody Wilson-Raybould has said she wants to submit written testimony to the committee, including text messages and emails, but she won't get to appear again. The Ethics Committee said, look, we've had Michael Wernick and Jerry Butts rebut her testimony. We need to hear from her again. And the Liberals said, no, we don't really. Compare that to Donald Trump, who, for all his belly aching about the Mueller investigation, allowed it to happen. Justin Trudeau has shut down, any chance of investigation at every turn.
So Justin Trudeau commented on the issue again this week and made comment as well on whether Wilson-Raybould and Philpott can run again as Liberals are heading into the federal election in October. What did Trudeau have to say?
Well, if you listen to Justin Trudeau, he'll let Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott run as Liberals in the October 2019 election. But, were he to kick them out at this point, I think that he would turn them into martyrs of some kind. The public believes these women over the Prime Minister by a ratio of 2 to 1. So if he kicks them out and says, you can't run as Liberals, we don't want you in the Liberal Party anymore, and we're going to stop you from testifying, well, the Canadian public might believe them over the Prime Minister by a ratio of 4 to 1, 5 to 1? This is not going well for the Prime Minister, and that's the only reason that Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott are still in the Liberal caucus. Not because Justin Trudeau wants them in there, but he knows that if he were to kick them out, it would be worse for him than were he to leave them inside, where they can continue to take shots at him.
Brian, the CEO of SNC-Lavalin, dropped a bombshell recently saying it was never about the 9,000 jobs that could potentially have been lost. Trudeau says it was. What should Canadians really make of this now?
So it was a bit of a bizarre scene last week. It was late last week. Neil Bruce, the CEO of the company, who the Prime Minister has cited, we can't let this company face prosecution. We'll lose 9,000 jobs in Canada. Jerry Butts said the same thing in testimony. Michael Wernick, the soon-to-be retired clerk of the Privy Council, said the same thing. And they all kept citing this, we'll lose 9,000 jobs if we allow this company to be prosecuted. And then late last week, Neil Bruce, CEO of the company, goes on with B&M Bloomberg. He's doing an interview with, like the Business Channel, right? So he's the business guy talking to the Business Channel, and he's like, well, I don't know what they're talking about. We never threatened to lose all these jobs. And by the way, they're very skilled people, and they're going to keep their jobs. Maybe someone else will employ them, but they're highly skilled engineers. They're highly skilled construction workers. They will still be employed. All right. So the CEO talks to the Business Channel and says, don't worry about it. It's all good. Well, this week, the company had to come out and say, he didn't threaten that the jobs would be lost, but he did say that some could be lost. Now, if we go back to the original comments of Neil Bruce, the CEO of SNC-Lavalin, he said there might be some jobs lost at head office with the executives, with the administrators. But again, you go back to his main comments, the construction workers, the engineers, the main people that everyone's worried about, they would be picked up by somebody else, he said. And I think that comment remains true. So this claim by the Trudeau government that if you don't, cut these guys a deal, they're going to take 9,000 jobs away with them, completely untrue.
Brian, the diplomatic tensions continue between Canada and China. First, the Chinese blocked canola from Winnipeg-based Richardson International. Now they've said no to canola from Regina. So what are the feds doing to maybe find a solution to the canola crisis?
Well, yeah, Justin Trudeau is now, he was in Winnipeg on Tuesday talking about how he's going to sit down with Hartley Richardson from Richardson's International, but that was the same day that they announced Viterra out of Regina. It used to be, Pool. You remember Co-op and Pool? Yeah, that's what became of what turned into Viterra. So they have said that they're going to block Viterra and Richardson's, and they're not going to allow either one of them to export canola into China. That has to be incredibly problematic for not only the companies, but for Canada itself. 75% of all canola grown in Canada is for the export market, and China is the biggest importer of canola. It's not the United States, it's China. They're blocking it now. So this has to be hugely problematic for the government. We've got about 46,000 farmers growing canola, 250,000 direct and indirect jobs related to this. This makes the possibility of losing SNC-Lavalin look like a Sunday picnic. I mean, there's no comparison at all. And yet, all Justin Trudeau is saying, well, we may send a high-level delegation to Beijing to talk to them about this. Yet we know that this is politically motivated, that this is about the arrest of Huawei CFO Meng Wanzhou back in December. This is all about that. It's all related. China does not do politics and business separately. They do them together, and we are now being punished over the arrest of Huawei's CFO.
It appears as though the trade fight with China is being portrayed as a proxy war for the arrest of Huawei CFO back in December. Are people in the know backing up that idea?
Oh, lots of them. Lots of people are just looking at this and saying, this is nothing more than China saying, all right, you took out our person, we will take out your economy. We will impose pressure on you. We will impose economic sanctions on you. We will do whatever we can to make you cry uncle. That's essentially what they're doing. I mean, do you remember playing arm wrestling or, any type of match with your older relatives when you were younger, and they'd say, we'll make you cry uncle? That's what China is trying to do right now. They're trying to make Canada cry uncle. So this is not about, is there an actual problem with the product? As we've discussed before, Hal, China has at times acted in a protectionist measure to protect their own rapeseed industry. So rapeseed is what we used to produce here in Canada. Then we changed it. We made it much more palatable, both in terms of the name, but also how it tastes, and came up with canola. Well, consumers like canola because it's less harsh than rapeseed oil. Rapeseed is what they have in China. They're not able to produce canola on the same quality that we have. And so the consumers want that. At times they have played the protectionist game, but in this case, this is specifically tied to Huawei. They have never gone this big and this hard to protect their own industry. They don't have the capacity, they don't have the ability to produce what we can give them. This is about politics. This is not about economics. This is not about consumer safety. This is all about politics.
China is not our only trade fight. What's the latest with the U.S. tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum? Is the new NAFTA perhaps in jeopardy?
Well, Chrystia Freeland was making comments to that effect earlier this week. On Monday, she was talking about how, do we really want to be ratifying the new NAFTA, the new USMCA, as Donald Trump wants to call it, and make us all dance like we're the village people? Um, she was saying, do we want to actually ratify this if the United States won't lift tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum? Here's my problem with this is that the government is known for more than a year, probably more than a year and a half now, actually coming up on 2 years now, that the US main problem was that we would not actually deal with the effect of China dumping steel into Canada. We would then give a polish, we would put a stamp on it, and then send it to the Americans and claim it was Canadian steel. We still haven't dealt with that issue despite almost 2 years of the Americans saying, we don't want Chinese steel being dumped into Canada, or sorry, into the United States via Canada or Mexico, claiming that it's your steel. Because if they come in via Canada or Mexico, then it's duty free. But we're allowing this steel to come in and then be shipped to the US. We haven't dealt with that still. So that's why we have these security tariffs on us. Uh, there's a bit of pomposity on both sides, both on the Americans and the Canadians, trying to claim, "Oh, how dare you? How could you?" No, both sides need to sit down and deal with this issue seriously. I'm not sure either side wants to.
Omar Khadr is a free man now and can travel anywhere he wants in the world. Brian, some are a little concerned, however, that he may use some of that $10.5 million worth of taxpayers' money to give to his sister, the same sister who celebrated the 9/11 attacks.
Well, I don't know if he's given any of the money to his sister. He's had the money for some time now. We do know that he spent $3 million buying a mini mall in the Edmonton area. And from what I understand, he overpaid. So, from what I've heard, the mini mall is worth less than $2 million. He paid $3 million in cash. Maybe he overpaid. Maybe he's being foolish with his money. Also, hearing that his lawyer, Dennis Edney, may have been paid off quite well. Look, we don't know what Omar Khadr is going to be doing with his money, but the fact that he's a free man probably shouldn't surprise anyone. Will it anger a lot of people, including myself? Absolutely. But this guy has been one of the most successful litigants in Canadian legal history. Every time since he came back to Canada, every time he goes before the courts, Hal, the guy gets what he wants. So is it a reflection of the fact that there were flaws in the American judicial process that convicted him? Or is it that Canadian judges are way too lenient on people that confess to being terrorists? I'm guessing that it's probably a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B, that there are both factors at play here. I'm not happy about it. I'm sure that most of your audience is not happy about it. But at this point, after Omar Khadr has won case after case after case, I'm no longer surprised.
Brian, two polls of who is popular and who is not when it comes to Canada's premiers. Scott Moe in Saskatchewan is among the most popular, but Rachel Notley here in Alberta and Doug Ford in Ontario, not quite as popular.
Yeah, well, in the one poll from Dart Insights, Rachel Notley got a bump up just ahead of the election. Their poll was conducted just before the election was called, and she got a bump, but only to 38% approval. That's the high watermark for Doug Ford in Ontario. Angus Reid has him at 38%. The Dart Insight poll has him at 34%. The only premier that wants to be happy right now is pretty much Scott Moe. Scott Moe's going up the way. Francois Legault in Quebec is also above 50% in both polls, but so is John Horgan, but of British Columbia, but just barely. But Scott Moe's the only one that's going up. He went up from 52% when he was first elected to 59%, and the rest of them are on their way down. The one premier you don't want to be right now, Hal, is Stephen McNeil from Nova Scotia. The man who was basically seemed like the Maytag repairman. Everyone loved him. Everyone waited on him. He's now at 24% support, 24% approval rating. Nobody wants to be that low. The only person I've seen worse than that was Kathleen Wynne here in Ontario, and we know what happened.
And let's see what's going to happen with the Alberta provincial election coming up April 16th, and with Rachel Notley. Award-winning journalist Brian Lilley joining me once again from Toronto. Thanks so much, Brian.
Thank you, Hal.